Good evening, everybody. My name is John Jenkins. Uh, it's good to be back doing a video this evening. It has been many months since I've tried to do a video. A lot has happened since that time. Mainly, my wife Millie and I have moved. We've relocated to Princeton, West Virginia. I'm seated in one of our spare bedrooms that we made into an office right now as I make this video. And I want to talk to you about something very personal tonight, and that's grief. Something, unfortunately, that I feel that Millie and I have a lot of expertise in. I'm not pretending that we have had more pain or more suffering or more loss than anyone else, but and that our situation is the worst in the world. I'm not saying that at all, but I feel like that if I share with you where I am, what we've been through, it's my hope, my prayer that someone out there that eventually sees this might find some encouragement to know that you're not alone and that it's okay with whatever you are feeling. When I looked this up, had it in my mind, I'd heard it. All of us have heard about the stages of grief. And when I looked into it, I found several different variations, several different numbers of steps, all of them pretty much the same. And I'm not one that usually goes for a secular concept. But I do agree with this based on the fact of my personal experience. I want to run through them real quick. 7 stages of grief that I found. Number 1, shock and denial. Number 2, pain and guilt. Number 3, anger and bargaining. Number 4, depression, loneliness, and then reflection. Number 5, an upward turn. Number 6, reconstruction. And number 7, acceptance and hope. Now, the reason I'm talking about grief today, a lot of you out there know what Millie and I have been through as far as our children are concerned. But I want to go back over a 12-year period and give you our experiences of grief during that time, and also where I am. I can't speak for Millie, but where I am in these 7 stages, and hopefully and prayerfully, somebody will be encouraged or comforted, or at least know, as I said earlier, that you're not alone, or that you're okay with what you are feeling. Number 1, in 2009, Millie's mom and dad's health had failed. We moved them to Narrows, a couple houses up from where we were when we were pastoring Cornerstone Church in Narrows, Virginia. And we moved them on one Saturday. And the next week, Millie and I went to our general conference for our denomination in Greensboro, North Carolina. We came home on the following Saturday. And Millie had no sooner got there. Her dad had laid down and passed away. He died in his sleep. And we immediately, due to her mother's health, took her into our home. Now, Millie and I were blessed to have our parents for a long time, and we often spoke, especially at Christmas, that we know when our parents begin to go, they'll go close, simply because of their ages. But that was 2009. In 2011, my mother-in-law, in May of that year, she died in our home, less than 2 years away. And then in 2014, my dad passed away. And moving through the list a little quicker, in 2016, in June of that year, our oldest son, Joshua, passed away after having lain in a coma for 10 days from an automobile accident caused by personal problems and issues that he had. February of 2018, my mother died. And then in December of 2019, what we thought, hopefully, prayerfully, would be the end of this string, our brother-in-law, Millie's youngest sister's husband, was basically murdered in the streets of Charlotte. He come out from work on the Friday before Christmas. He had let all of his employees go, and someone was breaking into his vehicle, and somehow in the skirmish, the gentleman, the thief, jumped in his car and run over our brother-in-law and left him literally dead in the streets of Charlotte. Millie and I hoped, surely to goodness, that would be the end. Then in 2021, last June, our second son and last son, our last child, was found dead in his car in and near Radford, Virginia, after struggling with personal issues and addiction problems like our oldest son. We lost both of our children. And so that was last June. And I participated, I conducted those funerals of all those individuals, parents, children, brother-in-law. And so we've had an ongoing 12 plus years now of grief. That's not counting cousins, uncles, aunts, and others that died during that time as well. And so I do have a little experience, unfortunately, in talking about grief. And I'm going to go through this list and show you where I am. And to be honest, I'm hoping it'll help me. And I'm hoping it'll help you, or maybe somebody you'll mention this video to who has suffered a tragedy. Now, I've become more sensitive to the personal tragedies of others. Breaks my heart when I see things happen and bring such pain into people's lives. So again, hopefully, as I share my heart, I'm brutally honest. I don't care to tell you how I feel. Just because I'm a licensed and ordained minister does not mean I'm not human. I don't pretend to be superhuman, and I don't go through life blindly thinking that believers in Christ should never have any problems or will never have any problems. So with that said, I want to go back and talk about number one. And I want to talk about our two sons. June of 2016, Joshua had a car wreck. He was age 39. He laid in a coma 10 days before he died. And we had to make the tough decision of removing him from life support. And we began to go through these stages of grief, didn't know how to handle them. We had experience with death being in the ministry and having lost 3 of the 4 parents by then, but nothing prepares you for losing a child. Nothing could prepare you for losing a child. And so basically for 5 years, 4.5 years, basically, to be honest with you, well, actually for 5 years, we were just numb. I don't know how to express it. Shortly after Josh died, we bought a home and moved. It was a beautiful home, beautiful piece of land, beautiful view, both front and back. It was the admiration of a lot of people. We were really blessed to have it, but it was never a home. It was just a place we lived after our oldest son died. I don't know how to explain that. There was no joy there. It was a place of depression. It was a place of sadness. Even though we were still in ministry, we were trying to go forward, but we never really did. And then June of last year, almost 5 years to the date, when Matthew was found dead, both of them being age 39, Matt lived with us. and had been with us basically his whole life. He was taking care of us, and his struggles led him to unfortunate decisions, but we lost him almost 5 years to the day apart. June of 2016, June of 2021. As I said, when Josh died, we were sort of confused. We didn't know how to handle it, but when Matt died, reality hit us immediately. Because I'm going to be honest with you, folks. Well, I'll save that for just a minute. I want to talk about these quickly because I don't want to do a real long video. The first stage is shock and denial. Matt didn't come home from work, and that was unusual. He never let his mom go to bed without knowing where he was. He was very faithful to her. If he said he'd be home at 10, he'd be home at 10. If he got off work at 9, he'd be home whatever time it took him to drive to get home. He didn't come home on a Friday night. Didn't come home on Saturday. Didn't come home Saturday night. Didn't come home Sunday. Then about midnight on Sunday night, the police knocked on our door and gave us the news that he'd been found. And shock. I don't know how to put it in words. Just absolutely mind blown, because surely a family that loses one child will never have to lose both. That's thoughts we had. And especially after what happened to our brother-in-law, Bobby, we thought, my goodness, we ought to be spared. Surely nothing else terrible is going to happen. But there it was. It happened. And so we were in shock. For several days, Millie actually reacted to things in a very unusual way. She, who is normally very quiet, especially around people she don't know real well, she was very talkative. She busied herself, even though her health is bad. And I would tell people, that's not her. This is going to hit her. And it's going to hit her hard, and it did. And then there was the denial. We'd lay in bed at night. When he would come in, we could hear, we had hardwood floors, and we could hear some of the floors crack a little bit. And we laid and listened for those floors to crack at night in our denial, thinking that surely this hasn't happened. Surely to goodness this is not occurring a second time. But it had. Second stage being pain and guilt. Well, see, these things don't, you just don't automatically check out of number one, go to number two. In other words, the shock and denial is not completely gone. And we've been in pain since day one. I hope none of you ever bury a child. And I really hope none of you ever bury two. But I know people who have. So I don't pretend that we're the only ones that's had to go through this. I know other people who have, and their journey, that's their testimony. But the pain, it hurts every day. Every day. Earlier today, I ran to Walmart to get a few things. It was cold and wind blowing. Millie didn't want to get out, and the whole time I was gone, my heart was rapidly beating. I was very anxious because I don't like being away from her, because she and I are all we have now. We don't have grandchildren. We don't have daughters-in-law. The buck stops here. And so that's the pain that we constantly feel. It is evolved into a measure of fear of being apart. And then guilt. Lord, every day I deal with guilt. What if I had done things differently? What if I hadn't made this move? What if I had paid more attention to this? I'm going to say something. It doesn't sound like something a former pastor would say. My greatest feelings of guilt as a father are that when my kids were little, I had become convinced the best thing I could do for them was take them to church every time the doors were open. Now, going to church was wonderful, and I love going to church. But my guilt tells me if I had it to do over, I would have spent a lot of Saturday afternoons with the picnic lunch at a park, tossing a ball, playing with my kids, investing time with them instead of going back home, sitting and waiting to go back again that evening. We were taught that was the right thing to do, but looking back as a pastor, I wished I had captured opportunities to invest in my children more personal time and showed them a man of God instead of just a church-going father. You can slice that up whichever way that you want to. Number 3 is anger and bargaining. Bargaining is interesting. It occurs before and after when you are foreseeing a possible event. You begin to try to make deals with God. And even afterwards, God, if you'll ease this pain, I'll do this. God, if you'll help me get through this, I'll do that. And I don't want to say a lot about that, but I do want to talk about anger because that's where I have struggled. And I'm still struggling with anger. Now, let me clarify. I'm not angry at God. At least I don't think I am. But I'm honest enough to say maybe ultimately, I don't know. I don't blame God for what happened to my sons because life sucks, to be honest with you. And there's so many things in this world today that attacks families, that attacks individuals, that people go through. I don't want to be insensitive to them anymore. But I don't blame God for this fallen world. But I've been angry. And I want to tell you how I've been angry. I've been angry in such funny ways. I've been angry because I don't think people have respected my grief like I think they should. Now, that's probably not true, but it's just how I feel. But see, I'm one that won't let people. I feel the obligation to still try to be me, to still try to be funny, to still try to cut up, to still try to act like I'm the strongest spiritual. I can get through this. But I've been angry that people haven't responded to our grief like I thought they should. I've been angry that when we've tried to talk about it with other people, that people really don't want to talk about it. But to be honest with you, I can understand. I had a pastor friend, Galax, Virginia. He bought my John Deere lawnmower when we moved from Max Meadows. And he said something to me. He said, I don't know how. And that's all he could say. I don't know how. And I said, well, the only thing that I can tell you is what we've been through. I take what happened to my sons, and they're over here, and my God is over here, and I'm not blaming him for this. It's two separate things, and that's how I get through this. People have told me I can't imagine what it's like to lose one child, much less two. Well, I appreciate that because it is very difficult. I've been angry that seemingly, and I'm not saying justifiably angry, I'm telling you my stages of grief. I've been angry that seemingly after the burial, so many people just went away. And we were still in shock and denial then. He was buried 6 days after he was found, and it didn't end for us there. Still hasn't ended. I moved to get Millie back close to family because she's unable to drive anymore, and she has an enormous amount of health issues. If something happened to me, she would be alone, and I had to get her close to family that would help watch out for her. So we've went through a lot of change, and a lot of that has been frustrating. The fourth, depression, loneliness, and reflection. Am I depressed? Absolutely. I'm I am very depressed. I'll be honest with you. And I don't know how to conquer it. I don't know if I can. I think I would feel guilty if I could, because the loss that I feel is the loss of my children. And for some reason, I feel like maybe I ought to have to struggle instead of moving on as if I don't have any remembrance of it. So yes, I'm depressed. We're depressed. Our home is often depressed. We feel lonely, though we have more contact now than ever of some family coming around. We've been able to connect with some of our old friends from when we lived here before. Not as much as we would like. We have a lot of void in our lives that we are hoping eventually people can feel for us. And we do a lot of reflection. We sit back and we think about our kids. We think about their struggles. We think about Matt's accident at age 3, getting hit by a car and the injury to his head that we didn't find out what damage had been done till just a couple years before he died. So we do a lot of reflecting, of looking back. And I heard somebody say today that the past can't define your future. That's somebody that's never been where I am. Because my future will be all about my past. I'm depressed today because as a minister, I feel like I've lost my ministry. I haven't pastored for 18 months. I have relocated to where basically nobody, even though I lived here 22 years ago, things change. Nobody really knows me. So the opportunities to preach and to minister have almost disappeared. As a preacher, you love to preach, and I've preached 5 times in 18 months, and that's been very difficult. That's very depressing. Along with everything else, it feeds into the grief. It's connected to the grief because it's all connected. I'm discouraged because I love driving the school bus, and when I moved to West Virginia, I couldn't meet their physical standards, and I lost my CDL license. I'm unable to drive a school bus. So all this contributes to the depression and the loneliness and looking back and thinking. But number 5, 6, and 7. 5 is upward turn, 6 is reconstruction, and 7 is acceptance and hope. And I'll briefly talk about them. I don't know how long I've been on here. I don't see the timer on this phone. But the upward turn, I asked Millie the other day, I said, honey, do you think we can see that? I know we're not there. Do you think we can see a place to where things are going to turn around? To where our pain's going to lessen. Our depression is going to weaken. Our loneliness is going to be replaced. Can we see that upward turn? And both of us agreed we think we can see it, like the light at the end of a tunnel. But we're not there yet. There are some things that we think could happen that would help us, but I won't get into them. After that, if we can get to that upward turn and we can make that upward turn, then hopefully we can begin reconstructing our lives without our children. We had always counted on the fact that Matt would take care of us, and now we have to go through redoing wills and making plans for a future without us, for what little things we have, what we want done with him because he won't be here. And That in itself is depressing, but something that needs to be done. But we want to reconstruct our life. We want to reconstruct our ministry. Millie loves to sing, and I love to preach. I always tell people I can preach at the drop of a hat, and if necessary, I'll drop the hat. But right now we're in a season where that's not happening. I still feel like we have something to share. I still feel like she has a song to sing in her heart, and I still feel like our experiences could be a blessing. Our testimony could help. I still believe I'm capable of preaching a sermon, so I don't want to totally give up on that and think that it's not possible. But those things are out of our control. They're in God's hands and the hands of people. COVID has changed the church world, and I understand that. It still doesn't lessen our desire to be a part of ministry and to churches and to be involved in church work. So, and then lastly, acceptance and hope. I'd like to think one day we can accept this. Again, I'm not angry at God. I've never questioned God my entire life. I've never asked why to God. Even though I wanted to when my brother-in-law died. I really wanted to, because that was the most senseless death I've ever heard of in my life. A great man, no reason at all. But I didn't question God. I have to trust God. Earlier in our lives, we lost Millie's younger brother in the late 1980s, and it really done damage to our family that we never really got over. We never dealt with. We didn't know how to grieve, and it still hurts her family members today. But we are looking that we can get to a place of acceptance and then have hope for a future. Yes, we're 64 years old, but we're not finished unless God says we are. And I tell Millie often, maybe we are done. Maybe God's just going to hide us here in the lower side of Princeton and keep us in the palm of his hands and let us ride this storm out until it's our time to go, or Jesus returns, whichever one. I don't know. I want to do for him. But I don't want to preach from anger, and I don't want to preach solely from pain. But I do want the things that we have been through. I do want them to be a part of who we are in the future, because it is very, very real. So I don't know if you got anything out of any of that. I just want you to know that if you are suffering tragic loss, you've lost a child, a loved one, or some other event, maybe it's not a bereavement issue, maybe it's okay to grieve. It's okay to feel these things, the shock, denial, pain and guilt, the anger, depression, loneliness, and reflection, because we are human beings. And these are things that come with that. Here's what I would say in a closing thought. If you are out there, and let me pause to say this. I've watched names come up this phone, and I've seen so many people who are right where we are who have lost children, and they know what I'm talking about. But if you are out there and you have a disconnected situation in your family, perhaps a sibling or a parent or a child, or I don't know, somebody that you fell out with years ago, listen, take the time to reach out. It's not worth it. It's not worth them passing on from this life and you having some type of grudge or unforgiveness in your heart. You may say you don't, but if you're not reaching out to somebody you're disconnected from, you do. You just need to be aware of that. Try to heal your relationships, because that's all we have. We've learned a great appreciation of family. And So with that, I'll go. If you think this will help anybody, feel free to share it. Let somebody know it's on Facebook. I'm going to try to start doing some Bible study videos. It's just took me a while to get back to this point. We love you. If you have a church or that you may want us to come and share our testimony or just preach or have a service, feel free to contact us through private message. Love while you have the opportunity. In my closing thought, I thought about getting this patented. I even looked it up a little bit. I wanted to get a t-shirt or a shirt that said, hug them while you got them. If you've got kids, love them. Hug them while you got them. Hug them while you got them. God bless you. Have a wonderful evening. And I just pray that you'll trust the Lord and don't feel guilty if you're hurting. Don't feel like you've disappointed God if you're going through stages of grief. He made you and He gave you those emotions. So you just let Him work their course and pray for us as we do the same. God bless you.